Hi, this is Decentered Media, conversations about community-focused communications for positive social change. Hello, Rob Watson here, Decentered Media, and today I am in Devon. I've come to Totnes and the Dartington estate to visit friends, colleagues in Sound Art Radio. We've got an event tomorrow. And I realised I've had a busy week this week, and what I didn't do was record a video summary of our community media discussion that takes place on Thursdays. So this is a bit of an after the event explanation, elaboration of what we talked about, what we were thinking about. There is a blog about this up on the Decentered Media website, which is decentered.co.uk, and if you want to take part in our weekly conversation discussion about community media, you can sign up via Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/decenteredmedia, and you'll be sent a Zoom link to join in. We hold our meeting every Thursday at 6 p.m. And okay, so we were talking about the 7 P's of community media. So one of the projects I've been working on recently is a Leicester Stories project. So that's one of the things I do, which is about community stories from Leicester and training and supporting community reporters to create media content that shares experiences of people's lives in the city and what we bring to our culture and our sense of engagement and interaction. And the community reporters take these stories and talk to people and ask questions about it. And we've been working on a project with which is funded by the Alan Turing Institute and working with Professor Edward Cartwright at De Montfort University about Leicester as a smart city. And one of the conversations we had with a colleague who runs Solver's Studio, Carl Quinn, was identified 3 P's: people, place, planet. And we've kind of extrapolated from that and introduced a couple more P's. So 7 so far, and I'm sure there may be more that we can identify and elaborate on. But the first one is people. And so the notion of thinking about community media as primarily driven by people. And I think this is really useful. Conversations I've had about media recently are audiences driven, and a lot of expectations and assumptions about media is that we're there to serve audiences, and I find it increasingly difficult to understand what an audience is, because it implies a certain kind of one-way direction. So you have centralised media producers creating content which is then delivered through a broadcast system or from a stage or a platform which is delivered to a patiently sitting and waiting audience. And I think it's more important for us to talk about people and communities, and we shouldn't really extrapolate too far into vague definitions of community either. I think audience is very vague. I think community is much more useful, but people, we're people driven, and we are seeking to serve the needs and to promote the interests of and to discuss topics and ideas that are of concern to people, not that we project onto those people, but that we discover, if you like, through relationship building and through participation and through access to media, which will follow up in a further P shortly in a few moments. So people are kind of what drive community media, and it's not the systems and the processes that drive community media. Process isn't one of our P's, but people is, and having a model of understanding of what drives and motivates people and what concerns people and what is their kind of sense of agency and what their sense of entitlement is and their sense of empowerment. That's really what we want to think about as a model for how we understand people and define a use and a way of approaching media on that basis. And then second on the list is the idea of place and where those people reside, interact, engage with one another is again an essential component of how we locate and understand the needs of people in a particular place, because we're rooted sometimes, most of the time, not all of the time, but we are, given the circumstances, we are, what's the word I'm looking for? Places become very much more fluid in our lives. Public transport, electronic communications have all changed the way that we anticipate using space, geography, places. So my parents, for example, their generation lived no more than 5 miles away at any point really from where they were born and where their parents continued to live, very rooted in a specific place. And what was the sense of identity that was associated with that place? What was the sense of belonging with that place? Now we kind of, with the ubiquity of the car, we travel around a lot more. With public transport, expectations are a global transport of flying around. And there was that famous phrase, that awful phrase from Theresa May in the Brexit debate about citizens of nowhere. Citizens are associated with places. We have responsibilities to a place, and that introduces things like stewardship, and it introduces things like civic participation and mutual self-interest, because we want to make the places that we live as good as we can possibly make them for ourselves and for future generations. But that implies that everybody has a fair crack of the whip in creating a place that they can be proud of, and that they feel fulfilled and are able to access and use resources that propel our growth forward. And that certainly isn't the case. A lot of places are deprived of social resources and are excluded, and the way our mobility is increased, but the meaningful engagement that we have with one another within our places has decreased. So our places can often be bereft of meaningful places to exchange and communicate and share and to learn about one another. So places incredibly important for a whole range of reasons, and it's one of the starting points for thinking about how community media can serve a sense of place, as well as serving a sense of interest and identity. That's part of the package of things that go on within community media. Third is planet, and I'm very fortunate today to be walking through the Dartington estate, walking into Totnes. It's a beautiful space which is managed as a kind of it's not wild, but it's the River Dart runs along, and we can enjoy the countryside, the managed countryside, and we can take a moment to appreciate the natural world more than we can do in our urban environments. And I live in a city, and it's hard to sometimes to appreciate what that city is about, whereas when you come to somewhere, I'm just trying to find the gate opening, let me get through, where you can find solace and reconnect with nature. But also on the grander scale, I think, is that certainly at the moment we have a real concern about climate crisis, a real concern about the damage that we humans are doing to the world, and that we are not being good stewards. We are polluting, and we are using up our resources in a way that isn't sustainable. And we're really taken great liberties with the natural world around us, and we're not, it's guardianship for the future, isn't really something that we're demonstrating, I think, appropriate sensitivity to. That's kind of circumspectly, put it mildly, I think. And we have urgent things that we need to change in order to ensure that the planet that we leave for future generations is well looked after, and becomes something that we can share and prosper from without being exploitative and unnecessarily destructive in how we use it. So planet is followed then by purpose, and I think once you bring those three things together, it gives you a kind of stop off point as to think, well, why are you using your mode of communication? What is it about communicating through community-driven forms of communication, whatever form that takes, however broad you can imagine it to be? How and in what way does that matter? How and in what way does communication serve a public purpose? And I've said this on a number of occasions, and you probably repeated myself, that the Boris Johnson government was promoting the idea of levelling up, and in its published manifesto, if you like, of aims, the levelling up white paper didn't include any kind of form of media to have the purpose to promote a better way of life, to promote more inclusive society, to promote equality of access to resources, to promote equitable access to resources, and to communicate in a way which is representative of the people involved directly rather than people being spoken about, and people having a voice in society and being able to talk through things in a civic, responsible kind of way, which doesn't resort to stereotypes, cliches. So the purpose we tend to think about with community media, and this weekend here at Dartington I'm going to be talking about the UNESCO model of community media, which is kind of well established as a model for participation. And that brings me to the next P, which is participation. That it's about access, it's about getting people to take part in the media, to be the media, to create content for themselves and share that content with their families, their friends, their networks, their associates, those people who form the bonds of community with, they commune with. It's about saying, we've got these purposes and these people, and they're in some way associated with this place, but there's also a sense that you do this by getting involved and creating your own media and not waiting for other people to represent you, but having a say yourself and learning those skills and taking that forward, not waiting for other people to turn up and do it for you, but you have to participate in yourself, and you participate on the basis that it's your human right to participate in media, not something that you have to wait for as a consumer, or that you have to wait for as somebody from the BBC, for example, will maybe pay attention to you one day if you're lucky, and you might get a shot of being in the public domain, but part of a momentary part of a conversation. Well, no, this is down to what you create, what we as individuals create and share, however good, however bad that content might be. Particularly this is important because one of the models of participation is misinformation and people promoting content which is designed to antagonize people, which is designed to misinform people, which goes down the route of social division. It's really important that as many people as possible are brought into the conversations that we have as communities in order to be able to sustain those communities and to make sure that they are viable and valid civic engagement. So that's the participation. Then we have practical. So to do that, what you've got to offer is practical steps for people to do this. There's no point in trying to pretend that everybody can be, you know, a top class YouTuber with a, you know, kind of movie-like DSLR camera that does amazing photography. And if you're into that, that's fantastic. You know, I take my hat off to people who can do it. My video skills are very basic. Walking around with a camera on a stick is the limit of my ability when it comes to video. But, you know, you learn, you improve, whether it's recording something on your phone, whether it's recording something on a cassette recorder, whether it's sitting around having a conversation with friends over a cup of tea and discussing and listening to one another, the practical steps that you need to take. You don't need expensive studios. You don't need to be sitting in a studio that looks like the command deck of the Starship Enterprise with loads of screens. You know, it's about listening to one another. That's the essential practical skill of listening, thinking, deliberating, how we engage with our media. So let's recap. People, place, planet, purpose, participation, practical. So I think that's 5. Is that 5 or 6? And then we have actually this is a bit of a cheat, because it's self-policing. We don't want to be controlled by the government or the state. I think there's a certain amount of reassurance we get from having the state validate what we do and to set out clear rules for everybody to follow, and minimum requirement of respect and safeguarding, I think, is incredibly important. However, do we need that to be imposed from without, or do we want that to be self-generated from within, and that people acting spontaneously and as groups and as direct participants take responsibility for themselves, for the content that they create and share, and that we don't hand it over to, you know, bureaucrats and government agencies, but we discuss it openly and respectfully. And there are different points of view that we all have, as long as you're doing it on the basis that your intention is not to antagonize other people or to, you know, demonize other people and to misrepresent other people, but is to explore. There's plenty of opportunities for people to, you know, kind of focus on. There's plenty of places for people to express their opinions. What we need is an opportunity for people to talk about their experiences. So that is something that can be much more, you know, for community media, it's probably better to think of yourself as a facilitator, a guide, a curator, rather than you might think of yourself as a presenter or a producer. Those things are less important. They serve a function, but they're less important. We had a really good conversation about this on Thursday. There is a blog that I've written some of these thoughts about. It's like it's an emergent set of thoughts, just trying to get stuff down on paper. I'm not saying that I stand by every point I've written, but it's worth, kind of promote a conversation, I hope. So I'm going to go for a stroll into Totnes now and have a look around the shops, and then come back, and we've got some events to do this evening as part of the. There's a festival on at Dartington Hall this evening that we have been invited to, a music event, which I'm really looking forward to. And then tomorrow we've got Vinod, forgive me, I can't remember his surname, who's the chair of the UNESCO Chair of Community Media at Hyderabad University. He's visiting the UK at the moment, and he's helping lead a series of discussions about the UNESCO model and the self-governance model for community media. So what I'll do is capture a load of content from there, and I'll use that for the basis of next week's discussion point to follow on from that. So if you've got any thoughts or ideas, or kind of join us on as I say, join us on Patreon. Go to decentered.co.uk for the website, and if you want to follow on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to these videos as well on YouTube, go to @decenteredmedia. But until next time, thanks very much. Visit decentered.co.uk or follow us on Instagram and Twitter @decenteredmedia.